people not to be unemployed, paying people to develop their diversity and to change society utterly.
Also the Greens call that ein Bürgergehalt. Also the fact that you are a citizen, you get $2,000 a month. So that is, you don't have to do anything for it.
We call it revenu garantie d'existence.
Also, but it is something, ich meine, that's always what we humans hardly understand, that the changes are slow. Sometimes it seems to be fast when they are something like that, but they are in our lifetime, what is 80, 90 years? Nothing, you know. So you have to think really, when you want to know what humans are capable of, you have to think in a much longer time frames. Does not mean that we cannot fight in shorter times. I'm not against fighting, you know. I'm just against to believe that our fights, nicht? Also Derrida called it always, you know, go to the demonstration, but don't believe in it. So, also there was yeah, right. No. Okay, please, guys. Yes.
Hi. I want to talk a little bit about the internet and social media. Your presentation was called Pathway Through Chaos, and as Professor Schirmacher brought up, very importantly, chaos theory is such that you can only understand it, the patterns looking backwards. But chaos theory also reminds me a lot of fractal patterns, which is something that is part of the patterns that you see in chaos theory looking backwards, which reminds me a lot of the writing of Deleuze about folding, and about how we create our subjectivity through the folding, which of course is related to biopower, and you mentioned reappropriating the production of subjectivity, which is a really big thing, and I see that people do this, and other theorists have mentioned this or brought this up as well. People do this a lot on social media and on the internet. They're sort of reappropriating their production of subjectivity. But of course, in your presentation, you also mentioned Marx and this idea of the machine as this social organism, which I thought was really important, social organism of capital, which we also see on the internet and social media, and creating this audience public of consumers. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about the tension between those two things.
Yeah. It's exactly the tension that interests me and that I like to develop. I mean, as I say, for about 10 years I became very interested in the electronic media and capacity of computers. I do run free software because I'm interested in that too, and it was a chance to experience this capacity of appropriating a technical infrastructure, making it your own, and doing what you want with it also, and obviously what you want can be a lot of things, and this to me was very inspiring and still is. So a large part of my work for years had to do with that, had to do with art that was in situations of kind of networked theater, where you were able to take the virtual possibilities, of getting to know people, setting up meetings, setting up the conditions for an encounter and an event, and we were also able to embody that as a performance. And I expressed this in one text as the revenge of the concept. The idea that the conceptual art, which was considered to have been frozen, and structuralized almost immediately after its invention, actually had another destiny, which worked through mail art and then through various forms of sort of networked performance before it really came out in this way, which was actually a wild time, where there was something extremely vibrant about being able to create conditions of surprise that were also political events, and also where it was possible to use the networks as a way to explore the world and get to know people all around the world. Now, another thing I like to do, though, as a critic, is to develop tensions. Having been part of basically the expanded version of autonomia, where we tried to make exactly a theory of virtuosity proposed by someone like Paulo Virno on the basis of a reversal of Marx's text. Exactly the text that I was quoting from, but you have to read it a little further till you get to the point where you can see what Virno was able to do, which is to totally reverse the text and claim that the virtuosity which Marx accorded to the machine in the moment of its domination over people and its moment of what Deleuze and Guattari call machinic enslavement can be reversed into the sort of free virtuosity of self-organization And Virno has those things where he says that, he says the state is like a typewriter for people who use computers. In other words, the possibilities of self-organization are so much more vast than the limitations of the bureaucratic state. Okay, that's a reversal. But we've been doing that for a while now. And I think that the limits of what can be said and done within the grammar of the autonomia in Europe, where I was living at the time, are pretty much attained. I think that those futures have been embodied. And I feel a certain repetition in the grammar of that kind of thing. And so I'm interested as a cultural critic to explore, and it's also what I've done in my last book, the permutations of cybernetics to see how it goes through. I think, in the 80s, I think second order cybernetics was quite interesting. And actually from the 70s onward, in the 70s and 80s, I think that the massification of that was, again, something tremendously vital. I think that now, as a cultural critic, I'm much more interested in looking at the way a machinic system is reconstituting itself in a very coercive form, with the rollout of one of the possibilities of the internet-type technology, which is continuous surveillance of everything, which is built right into the technology along with its openness. And of course, because I know the net, I've written about a text called which I call free association, about the type of the way that the internet was constructed, which gave it such a tremendous openness and capacity to integrate so many different machinic systems, because the endpoint is not controlled. That every machine has its own TCP/IP, stuff. It encodes just the packet, and that's just for transmission purposes. Unlike the national system, which were being developed to completely actually commodify information and have pretty much complete control and only offer services. That would have been the earlier protocol, which was that I think it was X5 protocol that was being developed by Germany, by France, and by Japan. So I think I think that getting into a machinic system is really, really interesting. I think that it's still possible, of course, for people to do to reverse, the power of the internet in many different ways. And I'm still way into it, but what I'm doing in cultural critique has now shifted because I already did a lot in that domain. And so now I'm more interested in analyzing. I think that in a more constricted situation like today, where you have, we're living in Web 2.0. Web 2.0 is in many ways the structuralization of the freewheeling improvisatory era of the internet. The hacker ethic that built and then tremendously, expanded the possibilities of the different Linux distributions still exists, but as is typical in a phase of tightening control, it's now much more underground. It's all, nothing is ever destroyed, but it doesn't have the social relevance that in periods of turmoil progressive ideas tend to gain. So you had a tremendous social relevance for that at the turn of the century, and then with the onset of the real control drive, all those things continue to happen, but in a more invisible way, because you have the corporations insisting on getting money out of this stuff now. And that's my reading of Web 2.0 in a nutshell. Otherwise I have a longer reading of it, but I think that's clear enough.
What usually fails at the level of activism is the possibility of communicating and getting together and creating, or relaying the agency of the collective in a way that is able to engage dominant powers. So I was wondering if you had anything to say, reading it through complexity, or cybernetics, or simply through your experiences as an activist.
Yeah, so I'm working. That's the problem that I'm working on. To tell you the truth, I think there's been some, there's a strong break that's incipient right now, which is happening in California, the university system, which responds to much more sort of hardcore conditions. It's the condition where your living environment is being wiped out. People are telling you that this is going to go on existing, but that the arts and humanities, well, we need a little bit of that, especially the nice stuff, but the mass of that we're just going to get rid of, And so what do they say? They have they've been working on, the most interesting slogan I heard was, solidarity means we attack. And it's the only way to show real solidarity is to go out and do some direct action against this system, where direct action means direct confrontation with the police immediately, you know, and immediate consequences too. So it's a tense time, but it's also, for once in the United States, a time when people are talking about the social system and not just their particular advantage or disadvantage in it, but how the whole social system works. And I think the next phase, and the phase that I'm pushing for, is to open up the conversation about what is it for, which means a conversation about what is life for in our societies. And then I think you get to something much more interesting, because you start to imagine and project and explore different possibilities of life. This is what I think, is the good side of the bad side, right? I mean, when conditions are more tense, then that's also a challenge for people. And I'm interested in the challenge. And I never wish that on people, but I do get interested myself in that sort of challenge.
Okay. So good. Challenge is always a good ending. Thank you. Come again.